Welcome to the third episode we're recording today on Ibogaine and Ibogaine research and stuff. You guys are in town for a fundraiser tomorrow in Austin, and we had Brian Hubbard and Angela Skudin on earlier with Jamie to talk about the updates on that, and your story too. They went into some of, but we're going to continue that here with Mark. And Mark, tell us a little bit about you. Where do you come into the picture here?
Yeah, so I've got my own addiction story. You know, I'm a 20-year military veteran, lots of combat, and had some fairly tragic things happen. Got out of the Navy in 2012 with a pretty good case of PTSD, very common story. And for a while that fueled success for me as an entrepreneur. You just kind of throttles are stuck all the way up all the time, so I just went. But there was a lot of unhealthy stuff in the background, and eventually I ended up being treated with Ativan 4 times a day for 4.5 years. Doctor just stuck me on it, and I dutifully took that as prescribed, but quickly developed a dependence and all kinds of paradoxical effects. It basically made me nuts over some years, but I ended up with my own addiction problems because of that. It got pretty severe. I was injecting cocaine, which is pretty much the most radical, crazy drug abuse there is.
Let's back up then, because we went. Where were you born?
Upstate New York, Manlius, New York.
Okay, what was life like back then?
It was great. I grew up out in the sticks.
You look about my age, right?
58.
Okay, I'm 53. So yeah.
Yeah, about that. No, upstate is a beautiful place. Rolling hills, lots of lakes, snowy winters. It's an outdoors kid, motorcycles, snowmobiles, skiing, all that stuff.
Adrenaline stuff.
Yeah, definitely an adrenaline junkie.
Which ended up helping you out later in the military, right?
Yeah, it's probably why I joined the military. Yeah.
When did you join?
1987.
So pre 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah, I joined the Air Force. I did 4 years electronic warfare specialist, got out, worked my way through college. I was actually in a graduate program for electrical engineering when I wigged out one day and joined the Navy. So laboratory life was intellectually satisfying, but it was dull. So, I needed some more excitement, so I joined the Navy, and that was in 96. So, for 2001, I was actually on an aircraft carrier in the northern Indian Ocean when the towers went down. So we turned the ship around minutes later, and we flew the first strike missions into Afghanistan.
And what were you flying?
The mighty F-14A Tomcat.
Oh.
Yeah.
How was that? We just had a Black Hawk helicopter pilot in here 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Just fascinating stories. I love hearing all those stories of, obviously an adrenaline rush.
A lot of
it takes
adrenaline.
a certain kind of person to fly.
Yeah, and it was pretty crazy because I got my wings, did my F-14 training, and I checked into the fleet, and 2 weeks later I was in Kosovo, which was some pretty serious business. So that's my career just went like that. Kosovo, Iraq again, and then 9/11 happened, and we stayed out for that, and then we're back in Iraq in 2005 when I killed a dozen innocent people in a very preventable accident, but big moral injury there.
You think that caused some of your?
It did. Yeah, it's funny. The reason I paused there was, I always struggle to say what happened to me in the Navy. There's so many factors because, let me just rattle them off. Life as a aviator on an aircraft carrier. So, you're gone from home constantly. Poor quality sleep, poor quality nutrition, chronic stress. You're constantly subjected to all kinds of radio frequency energy, drinking and showering in water contaminated with jet fuel. The high G impact on your brain from catapult launches, carrier-arrested landings, pulling Gs, 6, 7, 8 Gs. It's a lot of factors. Oh, and flying, with a 10,000 watt radar between my feet and 40,000 feet with nothing but plexiglass between me and space. So that's a lot of stuff. Yeah. What is causal? Throw some moral injury in there as well. I don't know. All I can tell you is when I got out of the Navy, I was unbelievably amped, and I couldn't do anything about it.
Mm.
And that, that led to trouble. And that's the story we hear from guys all the time. First responders too. I mean, it's just chronic stress, and it, your nervous system will adapt to that of necessity. When you're in fight or flight, you have enhanced vision, hearing, stamina, endurance, strength. Your brain works more quickly, and when you're engaged in activities like that habitually, day after day after day, your body just gets used to operating in that elevated neurological state. And, over time, that just becomes normal for you. So when you come back to the world, as we call it, everything seems slow and stupid and pointless, and people aren't focused, and they don't communicate well, and they're easily distracted. And there's just a lot of frustrations that set guys up, when that higher purpose is taken away, and you still got you're all jacked all the time. Well, now what do you do? This is why guys end up with addiction problems.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your transition like when you came out of the military?
I started a business before I got out in 2008. I figured out a way to stream live satellite television over the internet, which in 2008 was pretty edgy. So by the time I retired in 2012, I had a small business going, and it was taking off pretty rapidly. So I stepped right out of the Navy and right into my, it was really taking off, a rapidly growing business. And I just, I worked 80 hours a week, didn't really take care of myself. I didn't even understand anything about mental health, or I really was completely ignorant about all that stuff. I was just a guy who got a lot of stuff done, and I just kept going. So I worked like a madman, but, there were other issues. I was certainly drinking way too much, which is something you learn in the military. It's just, boom, boom, boom. It's just a way of life. And for a while that was my issue. But as things got worse, I had a panic attack one day, highly situational. I had a very unhealthy relationship I was in, and she was on my case one day, and I had a panic attack. I would have said prior to that a panic attack is some weak-minded wussy's excuse for not keeping their act together. I promise you that is not the case. Pounding heart, respiration, sweating, dizziness, lightheaded. I mean, I thought I was dying. Yeah. I literally thought I was dying. But that's how I ended up on Ativan, because I called a doctor, told him what was happening. He says, "You're having a panic attack." I didn't believe him, but he said, "Go down and get some Ativan." So I just started taking Ativan 4 times a day at his direction, and over some years, it just destroyed my life. Severe paradoxical effects. So I was highly dependent, which with dependence comes tolerance. With the tolerance and not adjusting my dose up, I got into what's called tolerance withdrawal, and it just got worse and worse and worse over years. And what that looks like with benzodiazepines is extreme anxiety, disinhibition, restlessness, sleep problems, derealization, depersonalization, all kinds of stuff. But, I just wasn't functioning after a few years of that. And, that's when the addiction got the best of me.
And did you start looking for other substances to abuse at that point?
I did, yeah. So, anxiety and sleep were the biggest problems up front. And it's interesting. I was at the VA hospital in Hampton, Virginia. That's a whole story in itself. But getting through that process was long and painful and stupid. But there was one day at the hospital when I ended up kind of bouncing around with this young Marine, going to all the different appointments and stuff. And I just struck up some conversations with him. Nice kid, wired out of his mind, like super bad PTSD. And we talked about that a little bit. But when I was leaving the hospital, he handed me a bag of weed. He goes, "Hey man, I didn't want to say it to you in there, but this is what works." And he handed me a bag of weed. I'm a recently retired officer. I mean, I don't know how to get weed, but the guy handed me some weed, and I went home. And to be honest, I had smoked weed in high school.
Sure.
It wasn't completely innocent, but yeah, I went home, smoked some weed, and went to sleep. And it was just a massive relief.
Yeah, it always helped me too. Sleep.
Yeah, it's great for sleep. But when you're severely disinhibited and you're suffering from chronic anxiety, Well, very quickly, that a little bit to go to sleep became wake up and like I need to face the day.
You got to regulate.
Got to regulate,
Yep.
yeah. And I very quickly went to, waking up and smoking weed all day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, with my cognitive fog from the Ativan, and now I'm pouring weed all over it, I just stopped giving a crap.
And still drinking?
Still drinking here and there. Yeah, I was mostly a social drinker, but a binge drinker. And I was very social, so it was a lot of drinking.
Yeah,
but
we were just talking about that. Fun excuses to go out to eat or go somewhere with alcohol. Yeah.
Everything's with alcohol.
Yeah.
There is no event that my friends get together and do without alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And the military is certainly like that too. But the problem with the marijuana is if you're chronically using like that, then your motivation goes out the door. Right. So my motivation was out the door. I had all this cognitive fog. Luckily, I had built a business with a lot of recurring revenue. But over time, I just neglected the business. I stopped going to work, basically. I just didn't care.
Did the business suffer?
It suffered. It took many years to kill it. I had a lot of automation and very robust systems. And, once people were stood up, that their systems just worked. And I could do a lot of stuff remotely. So, I kind of took care of things, but I stopped doing sales and eventually support fell off and all that stuff. And I'll tell you what really sucks about that. I was just telling Nate about this yesterday is I also started Bitcoin mining back in 2014. I mined about 250 Bitcoins. But when the business was falling apart and I wasn't functioning, I just started selling Bitcoins off to keep, to make the nut every month.
What's the equivalent now of a $250 Bitcoin?
Well, they're up around 110,000 a piece. I had 250 of them. So, was it $27 million,
That's
something
insane.
like that. Yeah, it's gone.
Wasn't there still a guy looking for one in a landfill that was on his computer?
Yeah, he had like a
Did he
thumb
give up?
drive.
Yeah.
And
He was like hiring people to go dig for it, and he never found it. I think he gave up.
Never
recently.
found it. No, there was some guy up in Canada too who had one of those crypto sticks that you have a passcode to get into, and he threw it in his safe. It was like 38 million at the time, and he forgot the password, and so he put it in a whole bunch of times. And I guess he had one chance left, and it's been sitting there for a couple of years, but that's gone
until he maybe remembers.
Well, if he puts one more password in, it's just gone. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah.
I'd try to hire the best hacker possible to get in that thing.
You get the NSA after that, right?
So what happened after that company? Did you move on to start another one?
No, no, I just, I had it up and running. It was growing so fast I could barely keep up. And about that time I was going downhill. So, I just, neglected it more and more and more. And, my anxiety was so bad that I wasn't opening my mail. Like just the thought of opening these letters come, I look, they all went in a box. I mean, there was one point where my house was full of moving boxes full of unopened mail. I wasn't paying my mortgage. I was one day from a sheriff's sale at one point. I mean, that's how bad I was. But yeah,
were you
somewhere
not paying
in
the
there.
mortgage because the money wasn't there, or just because the anxiety of paying
Just
the mortgage?
didn't care.
Yeah, just didn't care.
Just didn't care. The weed, the Ativan, the
That's
anxiety.
pretty deep.
I mean, I was, every waking moment was just hell because the anxiety was.
How long ago was that?
Wow, good question. Probably 2017, 2018, when it got really bad. So, the drug use went from marijuana to injecting cocaine pretty quickly. And that's because...
It's the opposite end of the spectrum of drug use there.
Oh, yeah, I went all the way. Yeah, 100%. Well, what happened was, I didn't know where to get drugs,
Right.
And so I ended up hanging around with some people who probably wouldn't normally hang out with. And after a while, they realized that I had some money and, they helped me upgrade the product. And,
you knew what you were doing, right? You were hanging out with those people for a reason?
Well, I was going to them to get weed.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But once they introduced me to cocaine, I mean, these were not friends. These
Right,
were
right.
stop by, score, leave,
Right.
But yeah, once they got me onto the cocaine, I was severely depressed. and I didn't have any energy. I was smoking weed all the time, little bump of cocaine, and I felt better.
Oh, yeah.
It was self-medication.
Oh,
I didn't know what self-medication was at the time. Looking
probably
back, it was
cocaine was one of my favorite.
It's great, yeah. So I would just take a little bump up the nose, and I'd feel better. And it's cocaine. So a couple months of that, and I was next thing I know, I'm jamming half a Peru up my face. And then one day I was over there, and this guy's was injecting it, and I watched him inject the cocaine, and he did it, and he went made this. You could tell he was really loving it. And I was watching him kind of wide-eyed, and he goes, "You want to try?" And I said, "Sure."
What do I have to lose, right?
Well, I look back at that now. It's astounding. I mean, if you knew me, I was a fighter pilot.
Right.
I was the most elite, the highly trained professionals in the world. And here I am and, hanging out with these degenerates injecting cocaine. That's what the Ativan did to me. It fogged my brain out so bad that I could not do risk-reward calculations. But once I injected the first time, off to the races. I mean, it's a totally different experience than snorting cocaine. And I don't know how
I never did inject it, but
you don't want to do that. I mean, it's unbelievably dangerous.
I snorted enough of it to stop my heart, I thought, for sure, but still didn't. So
yeah, I don't know why I'm alive.
I don't either,
to be honest. I mean, I did
there
it
were
so
a lot
many
of times I shouldn't have woken up.
Yeah. Yeah, there were times when, I'd be on a bender and I was so high, I could barely see. And I remember, shaky hand with a needle in it, trying to get more in. And I remember going, man, I'm going to kill myself if I push that plunger. And I just did it anyway.
Yeah.
That's how bad the addiction was. But, I tore my arms up pretty good. And one day I looked in the mirror and went, what am I doing to myself? I'm going to die. And so I went to the doctor who prescribed me the Ativan. I'm like, Doc, look what I'm doing to myself. He goes, oh, God, you need to go to rehab. I'm like, yeah, no shit, I need to go to rehab, dude. I'm going to die. I mean, like, help. And so he cold turkeyed me off the Ativan, which I didn't know it was a controlled substance. I didn't know what a benzodiazepine was. I didn't know any of this stuff. I just innocently took the pills. But he cold turkeyed me off of it, and that almost killed me. So I ended up, going back on Valium. I spent some months rocking back and forth in a dark room, trying not to kill myself. And I finally learned enough about benzodiazepines.
Were you single and living by yourself?
I was single and living by myself, yeah. There was a divorce in there. Yeah.
That makes it even easier when you're isolated.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go outside. I couldn't stand being around people. I couldn't think. I was disinhibited. I was depressed.
You said you were divorced?
I was divorced at that point. Yeah. Yeah. No,
was any of this addiction during the marriage?
No, it was all after. It was all after. No, that was more about she was tired of me being unhappy. I was unhappy because I had severe moral injuries.
Right.
And, nothing against her on that. It just didn't work out there. But, the thought I just had while we were talking about that is nobody stands up and decides to be an addict.
Right.
There's never a day when I went, I want to be an addict. Nobody does that.
Right.
What happens is you're overwhelmed by pain. You don't have the tools you need. There's always some childhood component. Somehow in your childhood, you didn't get what you needed to deal with these difficult life problems.
What was that in your childhood?
What was it? So it's interesting. Something I learned out of my first Ibogaine journey actually was, this is very simple, but at the time it was profound, which is I saw myself as an ant walking on the back of an elephant, specifically a northbound ant on a southbound elephant. And I realized that elephant was my subconscious. And there was something in my subconscious from my childhood that I just wasn't aware of. Right. It's my subconscious, right? So, what that was my dad had a very difficult childhood, and he grew up tough. And so, his understanding of what a young man needs to make it in the world is you got to be tough, you got to be capable. And I was the oldest son, so my father was inappropriately hard on me. In no way do I resent him for this or fault him. It was his way of showing love. But as a young kid, what I heard was you're not good enough. he was always trying to push me to, be better. But what I heard is I'm not good enough. And I internalized that. That became my elephant that I was riding on.
Are y'all still close today?
My dad passed away a couple years ago, but I was never angry at him about any of this stuff.
So there wasn't any animosity when he passed?
No. My dad had a drinking problem too, and I came to find out that all kinds of people in my family have addiction problems: heroin, cocaine, alcohol. It's all over that side of the family. This is something families should talk about.
Right.
I certainly talk about it with my children. My parents didn't talk about that with me, about addiction or any of that stuff. So, yeah, but that thing in your childhood, I mean, if that's your subconscious mind is much more responsible for how you experience your life than your conscious mind is. If that's what you're riding on, then you're kind of set up for problems.
Yeah.
And there's some other stuff too. There was some, sexual abuse and some other things as a child. But some guys go through these combat experiences and they're fine. Other people fall apart. It's all in there, right?
So, did you ever try psychedelics before Ibogaine?
I went to a few Dead shows, high school and college.
I only did it recreationally as well. And had I known at the time, it could have been therapeutic But early
nobody was talking about that.
23 years old, you don't really.
Yeah, I went and danced around like 19. A fool. Ate some mushrooms, stuff like that. I wouldn't say I was a big psychonaut or anything like that, but I had some fun as a teenager. But then I went in the military and just kept my act together.
So how did you hear about Ibogaine?
Yeah, so I have an acquaintance went through a treatment, another aviator. And came back and, told his story. And a mutual friend heard that and came to me and said, "Man, you need to try this," because he knew what I was struggling with. And it turns out at that point I had just finished my 2.5-year taper off of Valium, which was, that was an excruciating 2.5 years.
So that's where we left off. Was you taking the Valium? You took it for 2.5 years before you...
Yeah, so I took the Ativan for 4.5 years. He cold turkeyed me. There was about a 7-month stretch there where I literally just sat in a room rocking back and forth, waiting for it to get better. During that time, I educated myself about benzodiazepines and determined that, my best bet was to actually go on another benzodiazepine. Valium's longer acting than Ativan, which is helpful. So I found a doctor who prescribed me the Valium. And then I did what's called a daily micro taper, and I couldn't tolerate more than about a microgram a day. So it took me 2.5 years to get off the Valium.
Wow.
And during that time, I didn't leave my house, hardly at all. I was just trying not to kill myself. I'll be honest, it was bad.
Were you hiding all of this from your kids?
Yes. My friends, even close friends, to this day, tell me they're impressed by how well I hit it. Probably would have been better if I wasn't so successful at that,
right.
But I managed to pull out of it. But I went to that Ibogaine treatment just a few months after I got off the Valium, and I will tell you that the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me was from the medicine they gave me to help me. That was awful. That was many years of lost life, destroyed business, destroyed finances, health. I was 255 pounds at that point.
Really?
I was just, I was barely alive, I'll be honest. But I went to Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. I applied for a grant. I know at that time I was the only guy who wasn't a SEAL or a special ops guy that they gave a grant to. My case was so extreme. I guess Amber felt compelled to approve my grant. But I went down to what at the time was Nouvelle Vie Neurogenesis. So this was before Ambio. But Trevor had just moved to Tijuana. And I was in the second group they ever had. So I was, patient number 4.
Oh, wow.
Basically. And, the program was very different than it is now. But, I went through and I'd say it took my problems and chopped them in half. It also gave me some perspective kind of a framework in which to understand all the suffering I'd been through. Because, when you're that bad for so long, it's hard not to identify with your misery. You're just steeping in it all day long. And, why me?
It becomes your identity.
Yeah, it becomes who you are. And that's not good. I mean, you can't heal yourself if you're stuck in that. So, big thing the Ibogaine did for me was it caused me to see myself as a spiritual being, a fundamentally spiritual being having a human experience. And the purpose of that experience is to accumulate experience and knowledge and to learn. And somehow that gets added into your eternal journey, right? So, I just started to see things that way, which is weird because I wasn't religious at all going in. I didn't really even have a concept of God or anything like that.
Did you grow up in church?
My folks tried. My mom was Mormon, Latter-day Saint, which in my early teens, I just rejected all that. I just saw things that didn't sit right with me. And so I pretty much rejected organized religion. And I'm an analytical guy by nature. So I just, materialist reductionist.
Yeah, you find ways to disprove it.
100%. But the Ibogaine and certainly the 5-MeO-DMT, I walked away from those experiences quite sure that I am a spiritual being and that we have a creator whose fundamental nature is unconditional love. With that knowledge, it was a lot easier to see all the crap I went through as actually a gift. And that gift ended me up as, a host guide at Ambio, where it all started. So, and that's where I met Nate.
Did it only take, we're going to bring you in just a second, did it only take you one journey, one Ibogaine treatment?
So that first one, I would say, I was very, very, very bad.
And
I was not.
What's the success rate again for the first?
Well, it depends what you're talking about.
For the first, to where somebody doesn't have to go back for a second.
It depends
80%?
what you're trying to address, because Ibogaine gets a lot of things. So, it gets psychospiritual issues, it gets neurological issues, TBIs.
I guess the success rate, I guess, is what I'm looking.
So again, if you're talking about a TBI, and I certainly had a TBI, I'm quite sure of that. For TBIs, it's like 80%. And second treatment, it's I think 96% success. Or I'm sorry, that's for opioids. For TBIs, it seems like every patient has substantial improvements. Wow. Some completely resolve them. Sometimes a guy has to go for a second. I've certainly microdosed Iboga on and off over the years. I have found that to be very helpful. Nobody goes through an Ibogaine treatment and walks out of there all better.
Right.
It's not magic. It sets up the conditions for you to go home and be more successful at healing yourself. Because we all got it. At the end of the day, we're all healing ourselves. I mean, there's no magic here, but the Ibogaine is unbelievably effective at opening up that door. And if you're willing to walk through it, then great results happen. Guys we see coming back oftentimes come back because they don't understand how important the integration work is after their treatment.
Tell me a little bit about your integration work.
Yeah, so you have this treatment, you have this profound experience, you come back feeling better, your brain works better, your anxiety's down, you're more at peace, there's less noise, you have some improved cognitive acuity, but that wears off after a few months. The Ibogaine definitely lingers and gives you a window of enhanced neuroplasticity, and it's that window that's where the magic happens, because enhanced neuroplasticity means that your neurons are regenerating more quickly, right? So if you go home and practice new, healthier behaviors, you can rebuild the neural network that's associated with your self-talk. That's called your default mode network. And so you're actually going home and you're reprogramming that. And the way you do that is obviously you need to cut out the unhealthy stuff. So, not going to the bar anymore, not watching the news so much, not scrolling on the phone. What do you replace that with? Well, so for me, I had to develop a fairly elaborate morning routine. So because I would wake up in the morning and my anxiety was just through the roof. First feeling I had every moment was terror because my nervous system was so jacked up. That wake up just caused a huge cortisol spike. So what I started doing is I would sit up in bed for about 10 minutes and just do breath work, 10, 15 minutes of meditation. Then I would go downstairs. I would do some push-ups. I would do my 8-minute abs. I would run. So I was living on the East Coast at the time. I would go run the boardwalk, watch the sun come up. Something about the sunrise. It's a special
Andrew
time of
Huberman
day.
always talks about getting sunlight first thing in the morning.
He does. And so I would just time my run. So as I'm going down the Virginia Beach boardwalk, the orange ball would come up, and eventually that evolved into prayer while I run. First silently. Now I pray out loud, and I let everybody hear me because I think they need to hear that. The power of prayer is tremendous. That's something I heard hundreds of times prior to implementing it in my life. I implemented it out of desperation and with consistency and an open heart involved in it. It absolutely makes things happen for you. So, prayer became a big part. So I'd run my miles. Then I would sit on the beach, have another meditation, go for 5 minutes in the ocean, which, in the summer is not a big deal, but in the winter it definitely is. So I got my cold. Then I would go home, make myself a nice breakfast, put the dishes away, shower, and then turn my phone on. And that was key. So I just did that consistently for a couple of years. And, I just avoided stressors. I, just spent a lot of time thinking about the meaning of life, and I got very interested in world religions. I've done a lot of studying for many years now and all these traditions. I've kind of pieced together my own weird hybrid belief system, but it works for me. And, my relationship with my creator is direct, personal, and very robust. And I think that's the proof that I'm doing the right thing. Other people get their different ways, but, if you get to that, then, there's tremendous healing available to you through that relationship.
Well, this started out completely different, but I'm glad we went this direction. We can bring you in because the discipline it takes to be a fighter pilot. I can see when you get out and you're trying to channel that discipline, which you did, into your business, but then you lost your discipline when it came to the addiction. And so that had to have been wrestling with you in your mind as well. I'm not a fighter pilot anymore. I'm a failure. I'm an addict. I'm hiding it. Nobody knows. How long can I keep this a secret? And then you get to the point where I just can't keep it a secret anymore. Did you ever contemplate suicide?
Oh, many times. Yeah. And you just got to the point is, being a fighter pilot's a sexy thing, but it's true for anyone in the military that, that becomes who you are. That becomes your identity. I'm a military guy. I'm a SEAL. I'm a Ranger. I'm a, whatever. And then when that's taken away from you, usually in your early 40s, well, now all of a sudden, all the coolest stuff I was ever going to do in my life is behind me. Right. So that's a huge problem all by itself. Yeah. And then you talked about hiding, right? The shame. So the shame is such a huge part of addiction because what happens? You find an unhealthy way to solve a dopamine deficit, right? So you do that thing, you feel better, you think it's great, but then it doesn't match your moral model. Certainly didn't mine, and so you feel all this shame, you hide. That causes another dopamine deficit, and then your brain, whose survival mechanisms have been hijacked by addiction, which is exactly what it is neurologically. Even though you don't want to do the thing again, you feel like you need it like air. Your brain, it's a hijacking of your survival mechanisms. That's, people don't choose this. When I certainly would have looked down my nose at any addict years ago as morally decrepit. Having lived through it myself, I can tell you that's not what it is. It's you're overwhelmed by pain and you don't know what to do. And once you get in, go around that little cycle I described a couple times, well, now you're locked. And you need to break out of it just through sheer will is a tremendously difficult thing. That's where the Ibogaine comes in. It seems to just break that pattern. It interrupts it for long enough that if you are dedicated to using that window to remake yourself, you will succeed. The vast majority of people will succeed. They just have to make a commitment to killing old versions of themselves, letting go of things that are unhealthy in their life, the things that pushed them to behaviors that are unhealthy, right? Well, if you're willing to do that, then, it's almost magical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just so you know what happened is I spent, some years, I worked with ayahuasca a whole bunch and some mushrooms a little bit less. But it was a couple years of doing ayahuasca every other month. And I just, I'm lucky because I'm a retired officer. I didn't lose my house. I had time to just heal myself for some years.
Yeah.
When Brian was on Rogan and he said the word Ambio blew up. We had 450 applications within 48 hours of that mention. And Ambio was just going nuts. And, I was one of the first people through, and I'd kept in touch with Trevor, and I'd become an advocate. I spent a lot of time up in D.C., lobbying for this stuff. I brought some groups down to Ambio. Trevor called me up and was like, dude, this thing's growing so fast. I need other people to come down here and be guides or hosts.
Yeah, we'll get into it because I want to hear that story too.
Yeah.
We'll catch back up on that story. Let's catch up with Nate here. Born in Tulsa?
Yeah.
Played baseball?
Baseball, some. Yeah. Football, some.
Did you play through high school?
I did. Wasn't exceptionally good at it, but I played. Yeah. It was.
And college? Did you go straight into the?
I went to the military and ended up at Kemper Military Junior College in the early commissioning program, which commissioned me as second lieutenant at 20. And then back to Oklahoma, much to my chagrin, because I had no intentions of going back to Oklahoma. But I had some friends at Oklahoma State, and then went there, met a girl, ended up marrying her eventually. But it was, I had to, that's at that time I found out I had to finish my service commitment in the Guard and Reserves rather than go back to active duty. And I was like, crap, I got to get a job. So I applied to the fire department and eventually got hired in 99 for the fire department.
And when were you in Afghanistan? 2003.
So I got hired on the fire department in 1999. Continued doing the guard thing with the 45th Infantry. I was actually in Fort Benning, Georgia on 9/11, and we were on a machine gun range. I remember it like it was yesterday, actually. And then they finished out that schooling, went back home, and we were pretty much notified within that next 12 months for sure that we were going to Afghanistan in 2003. So that's kind of how the path went. Being in the Guard is weird because you go back and forth from civilian life to fire life, and I think I'm blessed to got to do both. To be honest with you, for so long.
What did you get to do in Afghanistan?
I was an infantry officer. I had a heavy weapons team, so.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was fun.
Anything exciting?
There's plenty of exciting things we got to do. I mean,
that was early on.
It was early on. It was not the
20-year war.
We didn't have any up armored stuff back then at all. Matter of fact, we were in Humvees that we brought from Oklahoma. They were pretty thin. Everything was real thin skinned, and our missions took us all over the country of Afghanistan. So it was prior to them having regional commands. So there were just pockets all over Afghanistan. So there was, a big base in Kandahar and one in Jalalabad, and one in Kabul, and then Mazar-e Sharif. That's about all they really had. And then The larger brigade mission was in embedded trainer teams with the Afghan National Army, so we'd support a lot of that.
See any action over there?
Mm-hmm.
Was it frequent?
Fairly frequent, yeah.
Yeah.
My job took us out every day. Like I didn't stay there and guard anything. Like a lot of folks got, saddled with gates and towers duty, and that just wasn't what they asked us to do. It was a whole different skill set, or mission set rather. So, but we did that for a year, and came home. Missed the first year of my first kid's life, basically. She was born a couple of weeks before we left. So I came home and had a 1-year-old, and trying to figure out how to be a dad, which was fun.
And then went back into the fire department.
Yeah, pretty quick too. It was super. I was ready to get back to the fire department for sure. There's a lot of stress in just being in charge in a combat environment of all those soldiers, and it was relieving to go back and being just a guy on the back step of an engine. So it was good to get back, but that's probably it was definitely where my drinking started being problematic. It was most every day I was off, I was drinking, and that sustained for almost 20 years.
You said down in the kitchen earlier that alcohol wasn't your problem; it was your solution to your problem. Which I say that all the time too, because it's nobody wants to be an alcoholic. They're not looking to. Can't wait to be an alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I might have met one guy that said that, but no, it's. I might have been that guy at one point. It was just it was the tool I used to decompress. I kind of like Slider was talking about. You have when you wake up and you're anxious and you have this anxiety level, and I love how you painted that with calling it your first emotion was terror. Man, that was like every day. It felt like, and I felt like I walked around at a level 10 of anxiety all the time. And when I would drink, when I would have 2 to 5, whatever. If I drink some beers, man, it would drop that anxiety level down to something manageable.
Right.
And I'm like, oh wow, and now I can breathe and be myself, and kind of loosen up things, and but you ultimately chase that. Alcohol's a very fast acting drug. It's it's great right now, but I got to keep feeding the beast to keep that anxiety level there. And this is all in retrospect. If I'd have known any of this stuff during that 20 years of my drinking, like an alcoholic career, it would have changed a lot of my direction, because we think that we're intuitive enough to see things happening to us in real time and stop those things because we know what's better for us. But that's the insanity of the substance, whatever it is, I think, because it becomes your center of gravity and changes your life. And pretty quickly, everything I was doing was about drinking. I would plan vacations about drinking. I would route my day about drinking. It's and held it together for so long until I didn't. In 2019, when things just got. In 2019, I was having a lot of relationship problems. My last tour was in Ukraine from 2017, 2018. Things had changed at home tremendously. I felt like a stranger in my own house. And come to find out I was, really, that growing apart phenomenon had happened. And, you just get to the point where it didn't matter what you could do, nothing was right. And she told me that she, basically didn't love me anymore. And in and around June of 2019, and I took off for another 6 weeks. Went to northern Michigan for some guard deal. It was like Operation Northern Strike, and then another warfighter exercise in Fort Riley, Kansas, and then came home. And a friend of mine was getting promoted to fire chief in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I drove over there to go meet some other friends to surprise him, and had a few drinks at lunch, and then got arrested for DUI. And it was embarrassing. And you'd think, hey, that's the point. That will stop you right there. That's rock bottom. It wasn't. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close to rock bottom.
I got one when I was 21 years old, and you would have thought that would have straightened me out at 21, but.
Because Veterans Day of that same year, 2019, I got drunk, don't know how I made it home, hit a car in a parking lot. And then that's when the fire department said, hey, that's enough. You're in trouble. We're going to, and I got demoted 2 ranks. And, I was, at the time, fairly upwardly mobile, and it was like, that felt like my life was over professionally. Like, oh man, everything I've done to prepare myself to be, a chief officer on the fire department, and ultimately, with the goal of being the fire chief or something like that, it's all gone because of this. And you'd think that was rock bottom, and it wasn't. It just kept going. My wife kicked me out. I lived in I got an Airbnb for a couple of weeks. It turned into 2 months. It was just not anywhere close to rock bottom. But I went to AA for the first time then, around that same time. And I was interested. I mean, it was intriguing because I could hear their stories and realize I thought they'd had a pre-meeting before I got there. Mm-hmm. And I thought they were all like, all right, this is what we're going to talk about, so that Nate hears it. Mm-hmm. That's the insanity of your brain. But in reality, what we find is this is a pretty common malady we all experience, so you're not special, bud. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting interested and got, stopped drinking. I said in the previous podcast, there's a huge difference between not drinking and sobriety. Mm-hmm. I was just not drinking. I was white knuckling it, I was making myself not drink, but I wanted to every second of every day. It would have made things so much easier.
Did you replace it with anything else?
Not yet, no. But I tell you what, I used all of my brain power to there has to be a magic pill to make me feel the way and there was eventually. It was Ativan. I mean, I found it. It just is not magic.
Is Ativan prescribed a lot to ex-military when they come out?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it kind of like the catch-all? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is the VA, I think in 2013, they published the VA DOD guidelines for clinical guidelines for treatment of PTSD, and it's very clear in there that benzodiazepines are contraindicated in PTSD for exactly the reasons that I experienced. Yeah. And yet the VA continued to prescribe benzo. It still happens. They've gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. There's been an effort, but yeah.
But during COVID, COVID happened, and I got put back on orders for the Army, and ended up working for the governor of Oklahoma for 10 months in a multi-agency coordination center, and was sober mostly through that time, but I started having that idea like, oh, I think I beat it. I think I'm healthy enough to have a drink. I
must not be an alcoholic.
Yeah, this was just depression. I'm not an alcoholic. I was just self-medicating, and I would specifically use phrases and concepts that I was hearing in AA against myself. Like, no, that's not me. That's somebody else. That's the homeless guy I see on the street, pounding out a Thunderbird wine, bottle. That's not me. Those are alcoholics.
Yeah, I use that excuse a lot too.
Yeah.
I don't drink in the morning, just after work.
You can't have a house and a car and kids and be an alcoholic. That's for people that have lost everything, right? Yep. And so I was wrong, and you'd think that was rock bottom, and that wasn't. It kept going, and then, eventually came off orders, promoted to, the way our demotions worked. I went back to being a captain for a year. And that's really was hard on me because it's hard and easy at the same time. Like, I love being on a fire truck.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost, I had a joke. It was like, hey, tricks on them. I love doing this job.
Mm-hmm.
I get to go fight fires again. But it was still a huge blow to my ego.
Yeah.
It was just, I saw things happening in the background that I couldn't affect and had no influence on. And it was just, and your ego was your ego is your worst enemy a lot of times with that stuff. And so I held my stuff together barely through going on binge drinking sprees, realizing I needed to get sober. And then I would either call a primary care physician or go to the VA and get a 14-day supply of Ativan. And in the middle of that, I'd been to at least one detox before I'd even gone to treatment. And I'd figured it out. Like, I think I got this, I can chemically detox myself and be good. And then it got really bad. I got re-promoted to chief. And I tell everybody, getting demoted was hard. Coming back was harder. I had a boss that had never dealt with this before and had no idea what to do with me. He knew that his church worked for him, and that was his solution. And for me, my ego and my brain couldn't register that then. And I started drinking again, and I asked for help finally, and went to the Center of Excellence. It's in Maryland, and that's when, I kind of started to accept the fact that, man, this is a real problem, and it came back. I started reintegrating into life, but that persistent idea still stayed around of, like, I'll be healthy enough to have a beer with my friends someday. Even after all that. That
was one of the big things for me is I thought I was going to miss out on fun. With my friends or with family, like at a wedding or a Super Bowl party. And one of the last times I really drank was the week of the Super Bowl. And there was just beer left over in the fridge, and I was drinking it all that week, and that's when I was like, but you realize that life goes on without alcohol, and there are other things to do.
It does, but my friend Wade, who I'd met at the center, we were, accountability buddies. We were calling each other all the time, checking on each other, and I'd call him, and he'd be on the struggle bus, and then he'd call me, and I'd be on the struggle bus, and we'd try to talk through each other. It's probably a God thing that we weren't always on the struggle bus at the same time, because we'd have probably just ended up together and just partied ourselves, to death. But, like, the reality of the thing is he went, he had somehow, through word of mouth, figured out, heard about 343 Fund and Ambio and the Ibogaine treatment, and went and called me, and I was drinking at my farm on a tractor, and he made me open up the freaking website, and he made me, look at it, and maybe promise that I would, put an application in. And I said, all right, I promise, for all the faults of being a drunk in life, I'll at least keep a promise to a friend, and I did. And I thought, man, we'll see how this thing goes, whatever, And Angela Skudin called me, and it was, we got started on that tracks. But, there were so many relapses in between all that stuff in that 6-year process of knowing I'm an alcoholic and not being able to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important that both of y'all had a friend that reached out and said, hey, this might help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important for everybody watching to know that you might be that friend to somebody. So if you know of a way to help them, and Ibogaine is one of those ways, don't don't keep it to yourself.
It's just one
saves
of
lives.
those ways. People get sober other ways, and God bless them for that.
Yeah.
That's great. It just wasn't in the cards for Nate. And Wade was right, man. He called me and said, "This is for you. This is just trust me. This is for you." And so, in my experience at Ibogaine, it was. And from going to treatment a couple times and to detox a couple times to, a 5-day retreat in Mexico where, you sit with psychedelics and you realize that that's what I needed. It is. And, I came back from Ibogaine and haven't had any desire to drink in almost a year. And that idea is so the idea that used to be so pervasive in my life of I'll be healthy enough to drink again someday is no longer a thought. And that's as honest as I could possibly be and that I can say the words I'm an alcoholic. I couldn't have said those words. I'm a problem drinker. I'd replace anything with it besides I'm an alcoholic. I'm a straight alcoholic. I haven't drank one of anything ever.
One of my pastors at our church, he always says, you're not an alcoholic anymore. You were an alcoholic. And if you start drinking again, you'll be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But God saved you from that. He rescued you in your bottomless pit.
Yeah. I like to remind myself of my human nature, and God made that too.
Yeah.
It's like knowing you can't throw a baseball right-handed, and you keep trying to throw a baseball. I'm left-handed, by the way, but you just it ain't gonna happen, bud. You're lefty. This thing I know that if I drank today, I would be in a really bad place within a week. And I didn't used to know that. I didn't used to have that ability to absorb that thought. And now I do.
That's good. So that's how you met Mark over here.
Yeah, he was our host. I was so sick then. I showed up day one and I was like, that guy doesn't like me.
He was pretty nervous coming in.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure a lot of people are.
Pretty much
when you get to that
nervous,
point,
Well, you have no idea. Like you've heard, I watched every podcast I could. And at the time, Brian Hubbard wasn't talking about this stuff with Rogan, and I think it was Sean Ryan's podcast, the number one podcast I watched, and I was like, well, wow, that he's saying his head split open, and I don't want that to happen. But whatever, we're just going to see how things goes. But the one thing and the persistent message in what he said was he didn't have a desire to drink again. And I'm like, man, I would give anything if what Wade's saying, and I trust Wade with my life, if what Wade's saying is that he doesn't have a desire to drink, and I know he's just as big of a drunk as I am. Like, if he's saying that, and then this Sean Ryan guy saying there's got to be some truth to it. And if I would give anything for that, just not to have the desire to drink, just to live in a day in the life of not letting that be my center of gravity. And it's not magic, but that's a miracle. That even for a couple of days. And what Slider said is so important. I think some of the success I've had post-Ibogaine was, one, I showed up having some tools from treatment, knowing things about cognitive behavioral therapy and how to catch thoughts and recognize what's happening and slowing down your thought processes and not getting into that cycle of spinning out of control. I had some of those tools already. I just couldn't beat this addiction. And then once that addiction within 36 hours was removed from me, I could start building new, not maladaptive behaviors to counter some of these very real emotions and very real conditions of life that happen. Anxiety is going to continue to happen. and not everybody else in the world goes and does Ibogaine. So not everybody's fixed, and you're still living life around a whole bunch of people that are, have their own stuff going on.
The barrier to entry to even get the Ibogaine treatment, you have to go to another country, and it's not cheap.
It's not. And I, super fortunate for 343. It's one of the big reasons that I've, said I'm going to continue to try to give back as much as I possibly can, just to raise money for them.
Yeah.
Other people need to know about this besides me.
Absolutely.
But I worked hard at, post-integration, rebuilding some positive behaviors, like working out, like meditation, like spending some time, some of that same stuff you talked about of, what's my routine in the morning really need to look like, and built that up for, the last year. And, this next month is a year of sobriety, and
I love it.
I'd have bet anything against that for a long time.
Me too. I would have never thought I'd be sitting here almost 3 years sober, talking to other people who have beaten addiction as well. I mean, it wasn't even on my radar. I would have been dead. What was on my radar was death, obviously, and this is a whole new life in sobriety. And we were talking about that earlier. That's a whole different life,
and it's a good life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't miss that. One of the other gifts I've been given from Ibogaine is that I get, physically ill, feeling like gagging to think about how I drank. Like, oh God, that's horrible.
Can you still smell the Jameson?
Oh yeah, it's and when I see other people drink, I don't, I'm not judging them. I feel, especially if someone else is drunk, I'm like, oh buddy, stop that.
Right.
You gotta. That's not a good way. You're gonna hate life tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you get to be our age. I mean, it just looks pathetic at this point.
I kept going out to the bars with the same crew I went to the bars with before my Ibogaine, but I didn't drink. It did the same thing for me, no desire. And what I found out is by 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, my crowd's too embarrassing to be around anyway. I just start going home.
Time to go.
I just hang out with different people now.
Yeah.
A lot. That's one thing that comes with Ibogaine. Some people will probably move away from you, but many more come to you, and it's a better kind of person. People who are really into personal development. Yeah, but that's uncomfortable.
It's that people into personal development is the cool part, because people who are really into making themselves better aren't worried about the outward facing minutia bullshit that like people deal with. They're not it's not about how much money you make or how you look to everybody else, or truly happy people emanate happy energy. That's just
you're not having to wear a mask of your ego, different parts of your ego,
and it's freeing. It's the most freeing thing in the world. And it's helped me just as a leader to recognize those signs and symptoms in others. You're like, hey man, I know you're not okay. You can tell me you're not okay, and we can help you.
Yep.
But all you got to do is ask. Instead of
permission to not be okay is the reason we have to tell these stories over and over and over again. Because when other people hear, oh, that you went through that too, and now you're okay. Like, it's just permission.
Yeah.
We got to stop pretending that we're okay when we're not okay. It's bullshit. It's not authentic.
Right.
The world needs authenticity more than ever, I think,
Amen.
right now. Yeah.
What'd you think about Nate when he came on his first day?
I remember he was very quiet and very nervous. That's about all. I don't remember much else than that. He kind of woke up a couple days into it, though.
Yeah.
Started talking, opening up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's how many days are you there? 6?
5.
5 days. And what days the treatment on?
Depends which clinic you go to. So we have multiple clinics running right now. So we have a group showing up almost every day.
I mean, like
it's like day 2.
Day 2 of the process.
The night of day 2 is when the Ibogaine is distributed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So tell me about day one. What does it look like when you get when you get there, and you get checked in?
Yeah, so my job is I greet them at the curb when they come from the airport in San Diego, and we get them into the house. We get everyone's got a room, and we get them situated and help them unpack. There's a little bit of medical intake, and then we send them to a sweat lodge. Is the first thing, and we say we do that to get them comfortable being uncomfortable, which is
that basically right away once you get there? Kind of
within a few hours.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Ibogaine's uncomfortable, so we're going to get you used to being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a chance to, for the guys to bond. And frankly, you just feel good when you come out of the sweat lodge. So, and it's a pretty interactive experience in there too. There's lots of rattling and drumming and chanting, and, everyone has a speaking part, and it kind of makes you open up a little bit. And I think that softens guys up.
Did it soften you up a little bit?
It did. Ours was, it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
This is sweat lodge.
It's like $1.80 up at the top of
yeah,
the thing. I think.
it is not cool. Like, it is not, oh, this is a sauna. This is very relaxing. It's like, my hair's on fire a little bit, I think.
And how long were you in there?
An hour and 15 minutes. And, it's, you're in a swimsuit with a bunch of other dudes, and you're get in there, it's really tiny, and you're trying not to touch each other's feet. By the time you leave, you're like sopping up water off the floor and dumping it on your head. And,
Hugging.
like, I don't care. I just want coolness. But it was a great experience, and I get why some people. It's like one of the two firefighters that were there. I'm like, I'm not leaving. Doesn't matter what happens. Like, that's our job to be hot. Like, I can't leave. This is. I'll just sit here and take
another
it.
pride and ego thing.
Yeah. I'll just, if I die, whatever. I died in a sweat lodge. That's a great story.
What a way to go.
So then you go back, you rest up that night. Do you eat dinner or anything? No, you said no food before?
Well, you eat dinner that night, and the food there is, like, at Ambio is some of the best food you'll ever eat.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Yeah, all our chefs were, chefs at big resorts and stuff. They love working at Ambio. Like, it's a great place to work. But those guys come there and they get to make up the menu all the time. They're creating things all the time. I take pictures of everything that's served to us, and I send them to the group at the end of the week because they're eating art. Like, it's just beautiful food. Yeah.
And it's really, really good.
So
it's not a serious fast the next day, but after noon you stop eating because you just don't want a whole bunch on your stomach while you go to do Ibogaine.
There's an 8 hour fast before we serve.
So what are you doing on day two? Are you mentally preparing yourself? Are you going?
We had individual coaching sessions, I think, with Slider at some point about intentions. Was that day two?
Yeah, so we give them a couple hours of breath, like an intro to breath work, which a lot of guys are like, breath work? What the hell? By the way, I'm the guy who, 5 years ago, if I looked at me now, I would probably punch myself in the face for talking about hippy-dippy stuff like breath work. But turns out it's useful. So, so they get a couple hours of breath work and meditation. Part of that's just to get people settled down for the treatment that night. But the breath work's very useful, particularly when the medicine's coming on. It's unfamiliar. It's very powerful stuff. It can cause some anxiety and you can feel overwhelming. So then they have a tool to just kind of breathe through it and let that happen. But then we do, a group circle where we pretty much talk about everything Ibogaine, just step them through the night, what's going to happen. And then we do one-on-one sessions, to answer any questions or talk about anything they weren't comfortable talking about in front of the group. Just make sure that they're super prepared. And then there's massages in there too. We have a great masseuse. So we keep guys busy, but it's talking about Ibogaine all day. Like by the time we get to the Ibogaine treatment,
They're ready.
people are like, I'm tired of talking about Ibogaine. Just give me the Ibogaine.
Give me the root bark. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
And then all that lasts about 12 hours. Is that right? You take it at night?
The Ibogaine?
The Ibogaine?
So you have to be on, per our protocol, you have to be on an EKG for 12 hours. So if we serve the medicine, we start our fire ceremony around 8. They have the medicine in them. They start around 8:30. We do it in multiple doses, so it takes about an hour and a half to get it all in. So by 10 p.m. that night, everybody's hooked up to a monitor. They're on a bed they've got an altar with things they wanted to bring, whatever, some candles and flowers and stuff like that. But they're all hooked up by 10. The intense portion of the night is probably about 5 hours, which is super intense. Things are coming really fast. It can actually be pretty overwhelming. But then you get into this contemplative phase that lasts well into the next day. For some people, the entire next day. So it's hard to say how long it is, but you're certainly in the treatment room for 12 hours. You get a lot done in that contemplative phase, though. The gray day, the next day that everyone talks about, some people's butts are kicked really hard. They're nauseous all day. Everybody's pretty tired. Some guys bounce up and they want a lumberjack breakfast and they want to go sit in the hot tub. So it's all over the place.
And I believe you said you wanted to go to bed.
I did not. I was not a lumberjack breakfast guy. I was curled in a ball on my bed. And it wasn't painful. It was just drained.
Yeah.
I was just drained. I had very little energy to do anything. And I think I was in that very contemplative phase where, a lot of introspection and a lot of thought about me and, man, I've never really even thought about some of this stuff. And I just sat there and you're almost too tired to sleep. You might have dozed off some and wake up some. But for 24 hours I was there. And that the fourth day, that morning of the fourth day, I woke up and I was like, I think I'm okay. I can probably have a smoothie. We had some kind of egg enchiladas. I nibbled at for a minute. And then, that's the day we do 5 MEO DMT. And I was like, man, I don't know about this. If this is going to be anything like Ibogaine, I don't know if I got the energy to do it. And, they reassure you that it's not. And it wasn't. It was great. It just was. And it was an excellent experience that, helped me forgive myself ultimately and allow myself to forgive myself, and realize that, man, all this self-inflicted pain is just self-inflicted. It's like, I don't need to do that. Everything's forgiven already. Why am I beating myself to death? This is silly. And that's, you can say those words, and until you feel it, it's a whole different feeling.
Yeah, that God's forgiveness is already yours, and it is infinite. It is unconditional. To feel that is so much more than to understand it. I mean, I can read scripture all day and go to church and do all that stuff, but to experience that is so much more profound, and it gives you permission to forgive yourself. When you realize your Creator has already forgiven you, well, now what are you doing? And it's funny you mentioned the things we do to ourselves, because when I come out of the 5-MeO DMT, every time the same thing happens now. I come out snot bubble crying because I'm so grateful for my life. And then I spend a half an hour laughing at the absurdity of all the crap we put ourselves through, because it's just absurd. Yeah. And once you get there, then it gets much easier to let go of your problems and all that stuff you've been hanging on to from the past that you can't change. We talk about it and it seems so obvious, but to live it is such a different thing.
Yeah, like you said 5 years ago, you would have punched yourself in the face for thinking all that hippy-dippy stuff. And really, it's just our ego is what got in the way.
It's all ego.
It's our ego.
All these problems are from your ego. And when you recognize yourself as a spiritual being, and that we all have, the same soul, then the ego seems really stupid and pointless, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, what purpose does it serve other than to cause trouble? I hope we evolve beyond this at some point where people have more empathy, real empathy, not performative empathy, which we have too much of in this world. But
well, I think it takes a generation of people, and probably their children, our children, to undo that and teach their children ego is your problem. And you have to bring up a whole another generation who believes.
We can do it in one generation too.
We can. You're
one
right.
generation.
Yeah, there's a whole book. Have you read Generations over there?
No, I have
Interesting
not.
book. But yeah, it's just ego gets in the way. It's really the cause of all
It's one of the things
greed, ego, and shame.
I did when I came back was sit all my kids down and tell them exactly what I did and exactly what I felt and exactly what I learned, because it's one of the things I thought about. I was like, God, I need to tell the kids this so that they know this is possible. Like, I didn't know this was possible. Like,
yeah, my folks never talked to me about that stuff.
Yeah,
And,
like,
I've certainly told my sons are 21 and 23 years old. They know my story in great detail. And I'll tell you, I am encouraged by that generation for a number of reasons. One is they seem to understand how unhealthy alcohol is. Our generation, it was woohoo,
Yeah.
we drank like fish as teenagers. Nobody even thought anything. DUI wasn't even a big deal. I was legal to drink at 18 for a minute, in New York. This generation seems to be a lot more savvy about that.
They're seeing all the problems it's caused with their parents.
Right. Yeah.
All these Gen X parents are addicted.
it's crazy that, and like, I've got some friends that are in the microbrewing industry. And they're like, man, it's dying. And that used to be such an up and coming freaking industry in every town, like, oh my God.
I was going to quit drinking a long time ago, of course, like I said every Monday. But then microbrews started coming out. All these craft brews started coming out.
You got to try that one.
Too delicious. I can't stop now.
Like 8-9% alcohol. I'm like, this is like drinking 2 beers in one. And
Right.
it tastes better. I was like, well, I can't stop drinking now. Idiot.
I'll just self-regulate.
Yeah. I'll just have 3 beers instead of 6. What?
Yeah.
And of course, you'd still have the 6.
Yeah.
Because there's 3 left in the fridge.
Yeah.
I always do really good in life.
I couldn't, but I could write a book on the insane crap I said to myself
Mental
about
gymnastics.
drinking.
Addiction takes up so much
does.
cognitive time and space.
Yeah.
How much time I would spend thinking about when I'm going to score, how I'm going to score, where I'm going to do it, how I'm going to make sure people don't know.
Yeah.
I have time to recover on the backside of it. I have the perfect plan. That's like half my cognitive energy was going into my next.
Yeah. And then you're like, what am I going to drink with dinner tonight? Let's see, I'm going to have steak, so let's get a bottle of wine. That won't be enough, so let's get 2 bottles of wine. Or a couple of tall boy beers to go with it. You're constantly regulating your addiction, and it's and planning your addiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's freeing. Honestly, it's being like let out of prison. The best I can.
Yeah, I think
explain
people are figuring it out. I have great hope.
Yeah, and I do think that people are marijuana's way more accepted into society now, right? And I don't know if I'll abuse that, eventually when I retire, if I'll try that, if I'll just fall into the same trap or anything. But
moderation is the key.
yeah, I don't know. Right now, I think I'm just, I can't. We literally can't do that.
Right.
Because I'm still tested for marijuana.
And if you're okay without it, why would you start?
Yeah. And I can, that's the accepting part of like, hey, I sleep way better now. Like, that's great. I used to think I couldn't go to sleep without a drink, I'm never going to go to sleep unless I have a drink.
Worst sleep too.
And it's the worst sleep for you. Yeah, you're not actually asleep. You're just sitting there not
I
REM
can get
sleeping.
5 or 6 hours of sleep now, and I wake up fine.
Yeah.
Whereas before, if I was getting 5 or 6 hours on a drunk sleep, you wake up with a hangover. You're tired all day. All day.
That's that feel. I've just got that feeling again.
Yep.
Like yes. Just for so many years, beat the shit out of yourself and
Anxiety and self-loathing. That's the
Self-loathing.
hangover.
So after you were done and you're back home, how did y'all keep connected?
Well, actually, the first time I've seen him since was in Chicago last week. But I mean, the guys I went with, we stayed pretty connected with. And then obviously, since I knew Wade, I was talking to him the first thing I did when I got back to San Diego was call Wade and say thank you. Because that saved my life. His effort to call me and say, this is for you, saved my life.
It's a lifeline.
Yeah. Yep. And it wasn't solicited. It was just because he'd went through it and somebody gave him that information. And so since then I've, talked, I spent a lot of time. When I first got back, I was on fire for 343. I'm like, I'm going to help them do something. I know I am. Mm-hmm. I'm going to help them do something. And I just kept trying. And over time, we had a fundraiser for our benevolence fund for our union. And I invited Angela to come, and she came, and she was like, you need to come to this fundraiser in Chicago for us. And then that turned into come to Austin and be on a panel and tell your story. And then that's turned into going to somewhere else, mm-hmm. For Americans for Ibogaine, next month. I'm just going to keep trying to spread the word. I feel like I owe it. It's like it's a debt that you need to pay back as much as I can. That's my opinion on the whole thing. It's just, but it was great connecting with him in Chicago last week. I'm like, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. There's Slider. He was our host. It's, and hopefully we continue to do this stuff. There's a lot of opportunities for us to go and tell our story, and inform others that this is a real thing, and that, it's not free. We do need to raise money for it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You probably who wants to start on the tell me about the fireside chats that y'all are doing. You going around?
Yeah. We'll have some canned questions. I haven't seen them yet. But,
us either.
I haven't either. Apparently.
Yeah.
Is Ibogaine fun? No.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we have some questions to seed the audience, and we're really hoping it'll be interactive. There's, if you look at who's up there, there's quite a array of experiences there. So,
and how many cities are y'all doing?
Just Chicago and Austin.
Oh, it's only been these two.
Yeah,
so far?
Yeah, but there will be more fundraisers. There is much need. Yeah.
Very cool.
The applications for 343 are, way outweighed by the spots that they have, and the reality of the thing is, we're worried about first responders and veterans right now. We talk a lot about first responders and veterans, mm-hmm. and we are simply a microcosm of the rest of society. That is it. But, we're, by the nature of what we've done and do, we're seen as service providers, like that we're held in high regard by society because we've sacrificed parts of our life. People see it as a sacrifice of part of our life for the greater good. So they're very willing to help veterans and first responders. There's not a lot of people out there that hate those two groups.
Mm-hmm.
They're all, me catching a couple of them, that's pretty cool. I think, it's a great opportunity for me to give back too. But this is the tip of the iceberg. And, just like I said, we're a microcosm of society. I'm the tip of the iceberg in the fire service because I got in trouble. I was, seen as hey, he's got a problem. We did some treatment.
But what a great example.
There are so many people that are on the struggle bus right now that haven't been caught, that are, that
still hiding,
are just, and they're scared to say something. And at least in the organization that I work in, that I can do my part. I can build an environment where it's okay for you to come to me and tell me that you're struggling.
Mm-hmm. That
I'm not going to shame you. That you're not less of a person. Because I've been through that very human experience, And for the however many years I have left on the fire department, I'm going to continue to teach others how to build that environment and how to be the kind of leader that you can come to. I tell my subordinate leaders, the captains that I work with, is the minute these firefighters stop bringing us problems is the minute we've stopped leading them. So if they're hiding stuff from you, You're not leading them at all. You're just applying the rules. You're just an algorithm provider. I don't need an algorithm. I need a leader. And I'm very fortunate. The people that I get to work with, they've bought in on this. They agree, and they treat their own people that way. And so,
are there a lot of departments that don't support it?
I would say yes. I mean, I can't speak for all the departments. I can't speak for my department. What I can say is that the people that I work with and my bosses and their bosses are happy that I'm sober.
Do you think it's a bureaucratic thing? Is it a government bureaucratic thing where they don't want to support something that's...
I think civil service, by the nature of civil service is kind of wonky. So it's usually tied to state law, right? Mm-hmm. And those state laws are governed by legislators, right? And they make laws that civil servants have to abide by, because everything else in a municipal code is typically tied to a state law. Mm-hmm. And those state laws are typically tied to federal laws. So what we're kind of reversing some serious bureaucratic norms here, in the fact that we have states that are approving clinical trials for Ibogaine right now. Texas, Mississippi, Arizona. We went through it in the last podcast, but that does not necessarily mean that the civil service laws are going to, or ordinances and regulations are going to catch up to what the state's leaning into right now. And so it's kind of an unknown. So administratively, and this is me just as a regular chief officer in a fire department, administratively, it's kind of a wonky position, right? So you can't, as an organization, like, oh yeah, I'm fully supportive of all psychedelics. Well, hold on, sport. You know, like you can't, like, what are we doing here? You know, does that mean you want people, on mushroom trips at work?
Yeah, you want Joe
Probably
six-pack
not,
to
right?
do mushrooms instead of getting a six-pack?
No, you don't. It's but that's not what Ibogaine is. Right. Ibogaine is in a very clinical environment with a purpose. It's got a task and purpose, and it is not something that people abuse. There's a lot of fire departments across the nation that are taking marijuana off their drug testing list. Well, some of the reasoning behind that is, well, the effects of marijuana are way better than the effects of alcohol.
As a matter of fact, I would say I would much rather have Joe out there eating mushrooms on the weekend than a six-pack. The DOD just announced that they've developed a urine test for psilocin, which is the metabolic byproduct of psilocybin. And the DOD statement says it's all about mission effectiveness. Well, they're completely backwards. That's a complete misunderstanding. If you have Seaman Jones going and eating mushrooms on the weekend instead of drinking, I promise you Seaman Jones is a healthier human being Monday through Friday.
Those same soldiers, sailors, and airmen can be in the barracks. I mean, and we say six-pack, and that's a lie. Those dudes are pounding 30 packs every weekend. And then Monday morning, they smell like a freaking brewery, and PT's happening whether we like it or not. And they're barely making it, because of course you can when you're 18, but try doing that crap when you're 45 and 50 years old. Like, it's not going to happen. Alcohol is a drug, and it's a poison. But society says we can do it.
Alcohol lobby's got a lot of money. And they just up the price of their alcohol and charge us to pay for their lobbying. So
it's there's a lot of warped incentives in our world, unfortunately.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that's a whole nother podcast.
So to answer your question, I think that there's municipalities are going to fuddle their way through this. There will be casualties of this war on this. If we have firefighters that, because honestly, they're staffed with humans, and they're going to have human kinds of thoughts that are going to be like, well, that's illegal and we don't tolerate illegal. Okay. But, they're also better and they're healthier and they're productive.
And it's time to have that conversation.
It is. And it's, And there's a whole other subset of younger generation than me. They're like, yeah, we just need to stop testing for weed. And I'm like, well, or like, let's just like, maybe there's a better way out there that we can just,
Rule followers. I'm listening to this. I'm going, the problem is people who are blind rule followers and don't question anything.
Oh, yeah.
I have a sticker on the back of my truck that says question everything. I think every kid in school should be taught why. Ask why. Why do we do this? Understand the whys of things.
They don't teach critical thinking anymore.
No, they don't.
They don't want you to critically think.
No, because then you push back against the rule followers. Rule followers are dangerous. Yep. I mean, look at throughout history. The rule followers cause huge problems. You should question the rules. God, we're Americans, for God's sakes.
Amen.
Rebellion's in our blood. People need to value their liberty more. Yeah. A lot of the problems we have is because people just seem to think it's a given, and it's not. We're watching it slip away in front of us day by day. That's what this Ibogaine thing's about. It's liberty. God put this plant here. It heals my problems. I should have access to it. Screw you for trying to stand in the way.
I agree. Well, any final thoughts? Anything you're looking forward to in the future of Ibogaine research?
Research? I mean, I'm 100% in favor of these states continuing these efforts. I'm going to put a lot of my effort into Oklahoma in the next year. Good. And at least just continue to tell my story and of how this saved my life, and maybe somebody else will get some, or get that opportunity. And
And are you in New York still?
I live in Tijuana.
Oh, you're full time in Tijuana.
I have a house in Virginia Beach. I go back and forth, but I'm currently in Tijuana at Ambio.
Very cool. Is Virginia doing anything with it?
No, and we've got a governor's race coming up, which is probably going to. I was talking to Brian about that yesterday. No, we need to go work on Virginia, and I'll be a part of that.
Good. Excellent. Well, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing your story, and
yeah,
these stories are what save people's lives because they know they're not alone. A lot of people think they're alone. When you're isolated, this is my problem.
You are
I
not
can
alone.
deal with it. I can fix it.
I'm screwed up just like everybody else.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great once people start admitting it. Then
That's
we're all okay.
Part. The hardest part's asking for help. Or luckily you have somebody who came into your lives and said, "Hey, you need help. This might help you." So let's just all go out there and help each other.
There you go. Shine the light.
That's right. Amen.